Hey,
Hey,
good
good
morning.
morning. Welcome everyone to another Operation Separation. This will be the first week that we are hosting live from the Shell Station LinkedIn page. If you've been here before, I like to have a confetti drop moment. I like to celebrate something. So yeah, I think that's worth celebrating. We've made the switch and we are just past the 1 month of Operation Separation mark. I mean, I've been doing it for 3 years, but this is a month in for everybody who's been tuning in. I've been having some amazing conversations for change. Today is no exception. I have the amazing Carl Shawn Watkins here with me today. Hey, Carl, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey, how everybody? Hey, Shell, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the Shell. I appreciate the confetti drop. Feel like it's March Madness, so I kind of feel special with that going on. Like I just won something. I'm Carl Shawn Watkins, CEO and founder of Carl Shawn Watkins Consulting. We are a coaching and consulting firm, and I just empower leaders to overcome their fear of vulnerabilities and their self-limiting beliefs and just empower them to understand how to lead, motivate, and just be that leader that others want to follow. And it's been something that's been a curation of mine for over 30 years of working in corporate, and now I'm doing it my own self with my own business, and I'm loving the reception that I'm receiving about it.
Yeah. Oh my God. So today, yes, if you haven't figured it out, we are talking about harnessing that vulnerability
Yes.
so that it can be one of your superpowers. Carl, why? I know you're a word guy. You have a love of the dictionary. I'm a thesaurus person myself. Like I always want to find the right word to say what we want to say.
Mhm.
Why does vulnerability feel so negative sometimes?
I think it's just at that point you really have to blame it on the dictionary. We are a society that goes by what words are defined, what they mean. And what they mean is really surface level what they mean. Like I can look in the dictionary, I can Google it, and I can find a top shelf definition of what an individual word means. And yes, is that helpful? Tremendously, but it's also harmful in a lot of ways because we adapt the meaning from what we read and we place them on our lives for how we live. And this is where the dichotomy has come about with me and having the dictionary early and understanding the premise behind that. Not with no Einstein kind of genius, but I looked at words and I said, this doesn't mean that to me. And I'm not smart in the dictionary, but I do know myself and how I live. So in the application of that, that's how vulnerability came around to me. When everybody was talking about it's a harmful or it's destructive or it opens you up to harm, and I didn't see that. I didn't see that vision of it. And I definitely didn't see that vision of it when it came to my life and how I was able to apply it because it's always individual. And what makes you vulnerable doesn't make me vulnerable. So, how can I just go and say from a blanket statement of vulnerability exposes you to harm and danger? And that's where that's, I wouldn't say curiosity, but that's where my cultivation of changing the narrative and the perspective gained its real power.
Wow. So it comes down to the application of the
Yes.
word vulnerability as opposed to like just taking in the definition and absorbing it that way. I can say for myself, when it comes to how I used to feel about vulnerability, and still sometimes too, because I'm not all the way through my healing journey. It's a process. Um, it's associated with fear for me. It's
Mhm.
associated with like the backlash of how I think people will respond if I show myself in a vulnerable way, if I open myself up and like show who I really am, if I'm not like this constant chameleon, so to speak, of like blending into my surroundings, and I'm just really am who I am authentically. Time now, as I've been going through my own journey, and I think viewers will relate, when you realize that like you can show up authentically as yourself, and that can be the catalyst that allows people to get to like, know, and trust you, which is what we're doing here on LinkedIn anyway, right? We're building vulnerable, powerful relationships and supporting each
Absolutely.
other. So tell me, oh, so many questions are coming to mind. uh, Tell me a little bit more about your journey through vulnerability. Like, how did you come to harness that for yourself?
I really came to harness that when I got to a point of I know at one point in time when I used to be in I used to be an alcoholic, having drank over about 30 years now, but there was a point in time in the midst of that, my sponsor had said to me, uh, well, he wanted to be a sponsor, and I never let that happen. I just stopped drinking, so I didn't need him. He had said to me that when you get sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? So you hear this frame of mind that when does that point happen? And it happens all over the scope for all over from all people. So it's not that point in time that we both share to say, okay, we're both sick and tired, let's move on. It just came a point where I took back the power that was me. The vulnerability hides in two places. It hides in shame and confidence or lack of confidence. We're not confident in who we are because we're shameful of maybe our journey, where we've been, things we've done, stuff we've been accused of, even talked about, things that we're insecure about. So all of those kind of things pin us into a circle of I can't express who I am. And all the time, that power is really from external. It's not even from internal. Because when we look at some of the things that we go through, we've given external power to so many people to guide our perspective and our life that it's really funny when we actually sit down and think of it. How I do things, I'm not going to do because of how you think about them. Like when you say these things out to yourself, you get to sense to see, okay, it's increasing in me the depth and quality of who I am. So if I continuously feed that inner, the outer will shine. And that's why I came to a place of I was like, okay, I didn't make a lot of great choices. Fine. So I am, I grew from them, I learned. I wasn't the greatest at this and that. Okay, fine. If someone asks me, I explain it, I move on. I don't wallow in it. It's not a pity party and it's not those things. And so I just started building power in it. And then I built power in my story. We discount our story as being our power because we see others doing their thing and we think we have to adapt some version of that to make us tremendous. But our story is also individual and no one else has it. Regardless of even if you two went through the same parallel of situations, tragedies, mistakes, they're still coming from a perspective of only you that's dealt with them. So all of those things, enhancement of sitting in them, reevaluating how I looked at myself and taking the next step forward. It was very humbling, but it's also powerful at the same time.
Yeah. It's interesting for me when you're sharing your previous experiences
Hmm.
with not needing somebody to look help you get through your alcoholism and your addiction.
Nah.
And that's not necessarily the vulnerability story that I would have thought of you for, because
Hmm.
I've heard a few different ones, and there's vulnerability in all of them.
Hmm.
So I'm hearing a different story that I can relate to and connect to in a certain way, and that just makes me like know and trust you even more because I'm seeing different sides of Carl and who I know and who's
Hmm.
showing up. And you're not shying away from those conversations either, which I think is really powerful and
Yeah.
like so important when it comes to being vulnerable,
Eh,
right? Uh,
Yes.
and you're doing it not to like you said, wallow in it or like ask for pity or like
No.
anybody to feel bad or like have those like oohs and ah moments, but
Hmm.
it's more like so that you can spark that conversation so that you can inspire other people to be better too.
Hmm.
And also so that you can keep bettering yourself. So I love that it has that like,
There's levels to this,
yeah,
as people
exactly.
say. There's definitely levels, and there's confidence that gain. When I was at that point of that, I had already kind of knew in myself that change had to happen. And for change to happen, there has to be action. And I I I marry action with change because a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm doing action. I'm doing this. I'm doing that." Action has to have purpose. It has to have momentum. It has to have change. I can continually do the same thing and I'm having action, right? But when I take on action, I think it has changed. If I give you my program and ask you to work it, I'm expecting you to change the actions you've been taking. And that's
Yeah.
how I look at life. Yes, I've taken actions. I've gotten up every morning. I went to work. Those are actions that we get accustomed to doing. But what actions are those are creating change in us, development, growth, personality, those kind of things, innovative, creativeness, those things that spark in each and every one of us. Vulnerability is the key to that because when you look down and you take the inventory and say, my story does matter. What happens to me has mattered and it will matter because I'm going to make changes to that. So will I stay in that pattern of because I talk to a lot of people, potential clients and clients that I've dealt with, and they have done and achieved great things, but they're stuck in that vulnerability mistake of maybe 8 years old, 10 years old, 20 years old. Those relationships at that point in times in their life that someone directed that to them. And they've held that
Yeah.
and we're all guilty of that. There have been points in time, even it starts as childhood. Our parents have said some things to us that have been harmful, and has really been a crippling effect to us developing who we really could be. But them as parents thought they were doing the correct thing, may have been scolding, may have been teaching you tough love, whatever they may have called it, or whatever sentence or phrase they will put it in. But that has cultivated a non-development in an area for you that you will carry until you're an adult. And you'll find yourself being that same non-productive in that area as an adult. So I've worked with some class C-suite people that have excelled with, I mean, like accolades, plaques, all that. But when I talk to them on the emotional, psychological air, they're still at the 10-year-old who mom said that they wasn't never going to be good. Or the 12-year-old who dad never gave them credit for getting that B instead of them not getting an A. That coach that they work with that said, "Oh man, you suck. You're never going to make the team." Or even that supervisor that said, "Oh my God, I've explained this to you 3 or 4 times." We get stuck in those points and places in our life, and then we start to develop ways that we won't get that same hurt, and that takes away from who we are. It takes away from failure. It takes away from learning, and it takes away from growth. And these are the things that vulnerability consistently lets you stay in.
Yeah. Oh my God. I'm processing that in a way of like, which one do I attach to the most there? Because you just gave so many different real life examples of like how this shows up as a child, as a parent, in
Mhm.
from a boss's perspective, from an employee's perspective. Um, I can say for myself that I hate repeating myself multiple times, but as on the flip side of that, so like that's from like a boss or like a manager perspective
Mhm.
sometimes. But then on the employee side, I also sometimes need to do the thing to learn it and like be really hands on with it. And sometimes I do need to hear it a few times. So it's like a constant like relay back and forth between like I hate repeating myself, but also sometimes I need somebody to repeat things to me, and realizing from both ends that neither one is necessarily right or wrong because we are who we are, and we just need to allow ourselves to be vulnerable and open with the fact of how we relate to the world and how we relate to others. um so like let's take this a step further, okay?
Mhm.
um you're I'm going to stick with the workplace for right now because
Okay.
this is where my mind's at, so let's stay there. What are the dangers of not being vulnerable in the workplace? Like what's going to happen, or what do you fear is going to happen if we don't create this change?
Um, it's going to be a closure. Uh, and I go to the pandemic because this is really the dynamic, whether you can call it catastrophe or monumental change, whatever title you want to put on it. I call it a reset, and I've been phrasing that from the very onset of it because it's really what it's been. It's been a reset for the globe. And when I say that, it has been given each and every person the opportunity to reevaluate how they're living. And in the essence of that, we can get back or rush back because that's really what we all know to do. Rush back to that regular hustle or bustle that we call normalcy and continue to do that. Or we can get educated in this in the premise of pause, which is okay, what's really important. And I think a lot of people have grabbed that. And they said, okay, what's really important? Maybe it's not going into the job spending 60 or 70 hours a week. Maybe it's not working on projects so much that I'm not getting meritocracy from my employer about. Maybe it said, oh, maybe I do need to do this and work from home because I have children that I don't want to put in daycare because I want to develop them with me. We're having all of these things that we never really thought about because we was in the mindset of staying busy, or as I like to say, busy work. We wasn't really achieving the things that we wanted to achieve, and we wasn't really following our passions like we desired to be. Some can tell you they were because they was making money. Maybe they drove nice cars, had big homes, but there came a lot of problems with that. So there came a settlement if corporation don't get it, which I'm sure they probably in the midst of now because it's commercialized now. And I love to use that term because that lets you know that it's not taken seriously. Corporate has commercialized the fact that people they've done better working from home. So what have they done? They went to the TV, they went to the airways, they went to their diversity departments, they went to all these departments that were there the total time, and now they're trying to engage them. Let's have more of this talk. Let's have more of that talk. And yes, it will look genuine from the onset because it wasn't done before, but it's gonna weigh out to be disingenuous because, and I can just say that some areas or some things that I know personally, people jumped on the bandwagon and we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. Now they've kind of like loosened some of the mandates and stuff in my state. Now they say, oh, well, you got to come back. They're going right back to that corporate circle. Yeah, you got to come back in. No, we taking away those days. Well, the mandate's over. So the disingenuous is going to shine through, and people have gotten smart to that fact. They've letting corporate run how they've done things for so many years, and we've had an opportunity now where the paradigm has shifted, and employers now have gotten smart and say, okay, I'm going to do what's best for me, and I'm going to take that chance. Because before, they never wanted to take that chance. Oh,
Yeah.
I gotta pay this bill. I got this mortgage due. I got this insurance. My kids in college. It was a dependency. Well, we found out it's vice versa. Corporate is dependent upon us. So if we stand together, which is you are seeing so much now, even with the boom in entrepreneurship. You're seeing that people are starting to say, yo, I'm the one got the value. You just got the name. So let me create my name with the value I bring, and let me see if I can be a business for myself. And this is what's going to be the scary part for corporate. And it's going to take a lot to catch up. Some may make that transition totally, and I don't think a lot will. And the trust isn't there for them as well.
Yeah. And you mentioned a few moments ago about how, I mean, it's proven now, like we can see it over the last 2 years during a pandemic, how people have been more productive. Workers have been more productive, being able to work from home and have a more flexible schedule and be able to like more seamlessly weave in their life around, with their work so that it's not one or the other. You're not choosing to have a home life instead of going to work. You're not choosing to work instead of having a home life. You can do both and still be very, very productive in both. And I think a lot of companies are realizing this and starting to take heed a little bit and like try to change things. I think there's still a long way to go though, before like it's really, really fully recognized from an employer standpoint. And I think as companies are taking away the mandates and saying, no, you got to come back to the office at least 2-3 times a week, or like, we need you here at this time, or like, no, you've got to stay late kind of thing. I think employees are like standing up now and nope, if I'm going to be here, I'm going to leave at 5. Or if I'm coming in, I first have to take my kids to school and I'll come in at 10. Like I'm not showing up at 9. I'm not showing up at 8 or 7 or 6. Like there's no before hours, before the day starts. I think it's more about creating a schedule that is flexible for for everyone involved, and being open to those discussions so that people don't burn out, people aren't overworked, so that work stays engaging. So you like even Zoom fatigue, working from home, like that was a thing. People were constantly wanting their employees to be on Zoom all the time or to log all their actions, since they couldn't like then oversee every moment of it. And I think that's causing a lot of burnout as well too, just being micromanaged in a different way.
Yeah, it is.
So it hits on both sides.
It
But I
does.
think employees are really like standing up now and being like, no, this is not okay. Like, all right, this is the norm, or this is what I've been told is the norm.
Mhm.
And now this is not working for me anymore. And if you want me to stay here, here's what I need in order to like keep going and feel good about it. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
and we're taking those, and I hate to use the word chances because I'm very particular about words I use, but that's the best way that I can put it, where it's an understandable thing. We are taking chances, and we're taking chances on ourselves, which is incredible for the fact that for so many years we've all been in this corporate kind of like entanglement of they hold the power, they yield the power, never having the true understanding that if we don't come to work, they don't have they don't exist, right? But we never took that into accountability of the one voice. So now the one voice, it makes a difference, because now that one voice is being articulated through lots of people, millions of people. They're speaking together now. So corporate has to take effect, and that's with any dynasty, which I would definitely call corporate. They are a dynasty. So with any dynasty, there has to be a collection of people to say, okay, we coming against you. We don't care what it takes. And this is where we are. The pandemic has pushed us to a place of where, all right, if I'm gonna be on Zoom, look, I got a 4 year old, 3 year old, 2 year old here. Like, if you want me on Zoom every day, they may run across the screen. They may, I'm not gonna imprison my child at home, but I'm still gonna be able to give you the work that you desire, the reports that's needed, the projects that needs to be done and completed. I'm gonna
yeah,
give you that. But there has to be some give and take in this. And for so long we were kind of like powerless to work with that negotiation. But now we don't. We're empowered by what we've done, what we've always done. We've always brought value, but we didn't see the value for the simple fact we didn't hold the cards. Now we do, and the thought process has to change. It's going to change, and those that don't change with it, I mean, you see in the big companies, Google, they say nobody's coming back to work. I think if I read an article not too long ago, for 2 years, the next couple of years, people can work from home. Other companies, Amazon's, they doing a lot of that as well. I know it's kind of hard because they deliver packages all over the world all the time, but their schedules and things are working toward that. These big companies are going to have to move to that, or they're going to be in a world of trouble. And in the essence of moving forward, they're not gonna have the power, the ability, or the manpower to even do that.
yeah. So speak like let's talk a little bit more about changing the conversation and changing that narrative a
Yes.
little bit. When it comes to being vulnerable at work and admitting your mistakes or
Hmm.
like a flaw or whatever the perceived vulnerability is, like I'm just not good at doing this over here, but you keep asking me to do this thing and I know I'm not good at it, but because you've asked, I'm going to do it. Like what's the first step to having these vulnerable conversations at work or even at home? Like if
Hmm.
you know that you're not good at something that somebody keeps asking you to do, or if you know that you're asking somebody to do something and and you know that they are susceptible to like making mistakes the first time around. I'm going to put air quotes around mistakes because as long as
Yeah.
we're learning from it, then it's not a mistake, right? So like what do you advise people to do to start having more of these open dialogues?
Um, the number one word that I always attach with vulnerable when I'm talking from a personal perspective is empathy. Always put yourself in someone else's shoes. Now, you say empathy. How can we do that all the time? Because I have no idea what that person is going through. But that's the power in empathy. It's having a design or kind of understanding. So if you're not understanding fully, just say, I may not understand what Shell goes through on a day-to-day process, but how I provide empathy is that I give way for what Shell is going through, so I can gain understanding and clarity, and then I can say, oh, okay, this is how we have to deal with this situation because this is how things are for you. And that doesn't take anything away from us. See, we are so bound by holding on to what we claim to be as power, right? It just blows my mind how we have to do that. Even as humanity, we just have to. This is mine. This is what I possess.
Yeah.
It just kills me with that mentality. I'll just say that from the forefront of it. And this is really what drives us from being vulnerable, because the mindset is so much is that most mine is mine and what's yours is mine. This is how people think. Like, and this is the process that keeps people from being vulnerable with other people, because the simple fact is that your tenacity is just making no room for me to sit and grow. And vulnerability presents that. So if we're not at that point, if someone having issues or someone having on a personal level, you have to take into consideration what's causing that.
Yeah.
Everybody's not stupid. So you just say, oh, they can't get it, they dumb. No, they may not get it like you get it. And there's that. I mean, go through schooling. There was some cats that got A's and B's while you were struggling with C's and D's. So you ain't get it. So when we have this empathy and this sympathy toward each other, then we be able to create and increase that depth and quality of our relationships and our connections. Because then we see the value that you add to me. And value is just that, adding is value. So anytime something is given, this becomes valuable, right? If I'm coming to you and we're working in it and we're both different, like just say us visually, you can see you're a woman, I'm a man, you're Caucasian, I'm African American. We bring things to the table,
Yeah.
right? So my process as a leader, especially in the workplace, how can I get that value regardless of where it's coming from, regardless of who's the carrier? I want to get that value so we can grow. And how do I get that? I build connections. How do I build connections? I be vulnerable. How do I be vulnerable? I let you in on some things that's going on with me that doesn't disrupt me, doesn't change me, and doesn't make me powerless. It still makes me Carl. But what I'm showing you is a connection that maybe you and I aren't as different as we looking and seeing.
Yeah.
Maybe we have a lot of things in common that we just looked at each other and said, that's not worth discussing. So this is what vulnerability allows, and that's why I came up with that equation: diversity plus vulnerability equals inclusion. Because you already got the diverse. Its diversity is worldwide everywhere. They've added diverse in every single field. Not too much is what we may want to see, but there's diversity just about everywhere. The government
Yeah.
has made it like that. Society has kind of like made those check marks there. The inclusion is there for select. Good old boys club, those cliques, those different ones that fit in with the crowd. But the vulnerability is those. That's what brings the equation together. I'm understanding that I'm in a clique. I'm understanding that they diverse. So how can I make a connection where we say, "Yo, we need you on our team. Let's create the ultimate team." This is what employers are going to have to do. This is what we have to do. Individualize as well.
Yeah. Oh my God. Um, I'm thinking right now about how, like, I had the amazing Jenny Langren on not too long ago,
Yes, it's my
and
sweetheart. She's a
I know
sweetheart.
you love her as well.
Yes.
And she talks about meeting people where they're at, right? So
Hmm.
that's for me also what vulnerability is.
Yes.
So that you're talking about meeting people where they're at and getting to know what they bring to the table, where the value is, and like how you can all come together to
Hmm.
do all these things better, regardless of what your background or your experience or the way that you learn and interact or do things is. Like, we each have our own value that we're adding, and how do we integrate that? Um, the other piece of vulnerability for me is the accountability aspect
Hmm.
of it. It's admitting when we've made a mistake. It's admitting when I'm actively still a recovering perfectionist, possibly still not even in recovery. It's I am very vulnerable and open about the things that I struggle with.
Hmm.
And that's not necessarily so that somebody can jump in and be like, oh, hey, let me help you with that. Like, if I'm getting better at asking for what I need, and I'm getting better at asking for what I need help with.
Hmm.
Like, what would best serve me, and not put any. I also, there's the people pleasing too. Let's put that out there.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a perfectionist, I'm a people pleaser. I've been working through these things, and they show up for me regularly, and that's okay. I know that I'm self-aware enough right now to know that I am working through them. It's like a process, it's a journey. And other people who are going through this, that's the vulnerability piece, is me putting myself out there and taking accountability for what I know to be true about myself. I'm not taking away from anybody else's shine by doing it, right? I'm still showing up as
Absolutely.
me. And there's value in that because I recognize it. Other people are going to recognize it. And hopefully it's that same way that you're talking about. I share a little bit of myself. Hopefully that breaks down a barrier so that they feel comfortable sharing a little bit about themselves. And that's how you build the conversation and build the relationship. I'm hoping that by being, I'm going to do it anyway because that's who I am now and you can't shut me up. But like, I'm hoping that by being vulnerable and sharing a little bit of my own struggles and how they show up in my life and my work is going to then connect with somebody on a deeper level where they're like, okay, I'm kind of struggling with this over here too. Or and here's a little piece of me too that you can relate to. And it's that's the accountability portion of being vulnerable for me is owning who we are and our actions and everything that that stands for.
And that is where a lot of the power of the definition of the word vulnerable gets its power, right? Because we're not always into the point of owning, and we're only not into the point of owning because the things that we don't want to own don't make us look good. And we're so much in a society where things have to look a certain way. And I know we could go through all of that, how a woman should look, how a model should look. I mean, it's just endless of how someone's derived perception of acceptability has cultivated such a culture in society that we fail to see the value that walks past us each and every day. The deepness of that is it's so superficial that is funny because we put all of our faith and trust and depth and perception and growth innovation. I just throw all the words in, right? We put all of that in on a thin sheet of ice because that's what our facade is, a thin sheet of ice. And we put everything that we have stock, lock, and barrel in on that ice as a facade. And at any point in time, it's going to break through. Why not just take all of that time and cultivate the realness of value which we see before us every single day? The individuals that we work with that bring something to the table, the ones that may not be where you are, but you have an opportunity to grow and develop.
Yeah.
We miss these points so much because we're fighting nonsensely, sensibly about these things that don't really matter. And that's why I said the pandemic was a reset. It took away all of those things what we thought mattered, right? You couldn't go out and eat, right? We thought that was a big thing. Had to go out to dinner, had to hang out with your friends. Okay, pandemic, you can't go. You know what I mean? And it got to the depths of so much, you can't even go to those relatives who are far off. Then it gave us a positive. Now I'm gonna have you where you're locked in with the family members that you reside with. Let's build back those communications. Let's talk at the dinner table instead of everybody having their phone out, checking their gram, or, or checking LinkedIn messages. It's so many things that has given us an opportunity to come back to the reality of who we are as humans. But what we constantly do as humans, we always think we're so smart that now we say, let's get back to normal. What is normal? You don't even have any idea. Because I can't say 2019 was normal for me. I did exceptionally too many things in 2019 before the pandemic hit. And I
Yeah.
was all over the place. And I was not a happy dude. So why would I want to go back to that? That wasn't normal. But see, our mind is so focused on things that we can obtain, things that we can put on a pedestal, things that we can idolize and say, yo, I've made it. No, you haven't. I haven't made it if you haven't made it. That's how I look at life. If I haven't given you no value that has been given to me or I haven't shared that, I haven't made it. If I see you struggling and I'm living on the top of a hill, I haven't made it. And that's my perspective too. And if we get vulnerable with ourselves and go deep down inside, the vulnerability is about helping someone else. If I've overcame something, let me be vulnerable enough to share that. Maybe
Yeah.
that'll help you down the road. It won't make me look bad. I've already experienced it. And I'm not holding on to it. It's who I am. It's what happened to me. And when we can create that confidence in that and not let others um, predestine us with that, we'll be a much better world. We really would. And I know this sounds simple for all you people watching. I know it does. I know it
Ah,
does.
that's worth celebrating.
Oh, I love celebrations.
Yeah, that's so worth celebrating, Carl, because as you said, you've already gone through it. It's not going to hinder you in any way by like sharing what you've gone through in hopes that somebody else can relate to it.
Absolutely.
So that and that vulnerability is so powerful.
Yeah.
It just it's powerful for you. It's powerful for anybody who's engaging with you, for anybody who's seeing you, who's like creeping on your page and like, oh, like I like what he's got to say, like, but I haven't really found that connection yet, and they're just watching. People are always watching. They're
They
always
are.
lurking and seeing what we're doing, and I don't mean this in a vain way. Like
Hmm.
people are gonna watch until they feel that moment to act, right?
Yes.
Until they're called to act and they feel it and it's a true yes for them.
Mhm.
And so people are watching that we don't even know about yet.
This is
People are
true.
need to hear our messages before before they probably even know that they need them. And so the more that we keep showing up and putting ourselves out there and getting vulnerable with ourselves so that others can become more vulnerable too.
Hmm.
Whew, I'm so here for all of that. It's just like the
Yes.
power, the vulnerable keeps on giving,
It
leading
does.
to more vulnerable conversations. You called it a reset.
Hmm.
I that's just one cog in the wheel for like Operation Separation, right?
Yes.
Um, and and tying it back to what you said in the beginning, it's when you have that moment, that clarity of like, I am sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Hmm.
That's when the reset needs to happen. That's when the Operation Separation can begin. Because otherwise, you're just banging your head against the wall. You're going through that day to day. You're doing the same thing that feels comfortable. Why
And
not
it's a
switch things up, right?
yeah, and it's a constantness of working. And a lot of people, when I raised my kids when they were little, I didn't do the belt thing, right? That wasn't the part because that's what I got. So I made a conscious effort as an adult. Once I had children, I was going to raise them differently. Now that didn't take away from how I was raised. I didn't spend time in jail. I wasn't strung out on drugs. I didn't, some of the horrible things that we want to keep our children from. I didn't participate in a lot of those things, and my parents, to their understanding and acknowledgement of what they knew when they raised me, they did the best that they could with what they knew how to do. I took it upon myself to go further than that because I felt my children deserve more than that. And I didn't say that from a place of a high horse. I said that from a place of there has to be some growth and learning in that. So if I'm going to raise my kids the same way that I was raised, there was no growing and learning from me as an adult and a parent that I would be able to pass on to them, right? Because we're coming into an age of where I came up, your parents said, because I said so. I was raising my child in the age of point was saying, well, why? So they're not going with the question is not because I said so doesn't quantify as an answer for them.
Yeah.
So now I have to go along with raising with the newness of saying, okay, yes, it is still because I said so, but this is why I said so. This is what happens when you don't do like I said so. So now there has to be a creation of growth. So that is growth in me as a parent that also has been able to me instill that as a parent to them. So now they have different attributes of growing up that I didn't have. They have different resources on which to grapple with that I didn't have. So when we pass those kinds of things along, only vulnerability can help you do that. I could say, yeah, how many of us have said it? Oh man, I don't want to be like my dad. I don't want to be like my mom, right? There are points and places in our life where we said that based upon whatever our relationships was with our parents. Oh, I'm not gonna raise my kids like that because that's how my mom did me. I'm not. How many times do we sit in the pattern of life and say, you know what, my mom said the same thing, and you've been and just said that same thing to your kid? Just subconsciously, if we continue to just live without purpose, without change, without trying to change how we are, the same things will repeat itself. And that's where they get it from. History will repeat itself. History will only repeat itself if there's no lessons learned from the history. It's only going to repeat itself. And I never agree with that. Yeah, history is doomed to repeat itself. It's only doomed if nobody took the notes, if nobody took the clip notes and learned. from the history. That's why it's there. It's our story to learn from. I get simplistic sometimes, but it's really simple to me when I look at things in a lot of ways. And I think
Yeah.
we overconvolute and we overcrowd things with so many of me-ness, because that's really what it is. Me. What makes me happy? What makes me okay? What makes me shine? What makes me, we're a me society. Always have been. And I'm sure we'll always be. We'll have some lights that shine and say, okay, it's about others. We've always had that. But for the most part, our society, it's about me. What can I get? Where can I go? Who can I? Who can I? And when we stop being like that, I'll always accentuate the power of being positive, the power of being vulnerable. I'll say that. I'll always accentuate
Yeah.
that. Definitely. But I do think it's very important also for those who's listening as well to acknowledge the challenges of actually practicing it. Not saying it's easy. So I just want you to know that even though I'm talking in this confidence, it took 30 plus years to get to this point. I'm not just giving you 5 minutes of conversation. I'm not giving you an hour conversation on a live. It took 30 years of me working through my journey of life to say, okay, I'm
Yeah.
older. I'm older than 30 though, but I'm just saying it took 30 years of that point in time in my life to say, okay, all right, Carl, what's going to be different? Like you can't keep going on this way. Just sit back, take a couple of hours in your day, your time, and say, how am I going to do this different? And start mapping it out and start
Yeah.
being vulnerable with yourself, which is nothing but being truthful.
Okay. Let's break this down just a little bit more,
All
because I
right,
love the direction that you're going with
all
this.
right,
Um, it is difficult to do this. It's easier said than done.
absolutely.
With a lot of things. What is something that people can do right now to be more vulnerable? What do you advise your clients do to get started? Like what's the simplest course of action for people to take?
I always start even one of the first things in my program that I do circumstances. What circumstances are you in? Because circumstances dictate a lot what we don't give credit to. Circumstances that we're in dictate how we are, how we feel, how we act, how we respond, how we maybe be preventive, or have to we be after the fact. So, what circumstance are you in? And to understand that, it takes evaluation.
Yeah.
If I want to know where I'm at, then I have to evaluate what I'm in. Right? It sounds like middle. It sounds a little bit like riddle me this, but it's really simple. What circumstances am I in right now that I don't want to be in? And after that, what are my thoughts about being in these circumstances? Are they bringing me thoughts of joy? Am I being thought that I have value? Am I being thought that I'm even being understood in my own personal circle? Start there. Don't start at the job. Don't leave your house and go to the job, try to fix that. Start at home. You gotta start at home. So what's at home? What circumstances are going on at home that maybe spouse, children, they don't value me? Why? Is it something I project? Is it the self-confidence I don't have? Is there traumas that I haven't dealt with? Are there
Mm.
things that's going on with me that I haven't sat down with self? Because I talk to myself a lot. Sat down with self and have this conversation and say, okay, self, where are we going from here? So those are the initial points that I start with whenever I give, and I do vulnerability assessments with clients. That's the initial form that I give them, and there's some questions on there that answer, and it's just an evaluation of you. I don't go through, even though I do it for leaders as well. I do it for executives. All of that coaching, it all starts with that vulnerability assessment because I'm dealing with the individual, and if I can't make you who you need to be, it doesn't matter where you're going because you're going
Yeah.
to take that broken person to every place that you're going to visit. So it has to start with the individual. And that's the first thing I do. I start with the circumstances.
So and evaluation is always necessary, right? Like you
Absolutely.
got to know where you are right now. You got to see where you've been
Hmm.
and in order to evaluate where you're going or where you want to go.
Hmm.
So this is a great segue to this. how can people find you, connect with you to learn more about being vulnerable in their lives and take this assessment, do this evaluation with you?
Yes, you can follow me, follow my work on LinkedIn. That is where I mostly reside. I do have the other social medias, but LinkedIn is a curation of millions of people with millions of ideas. So why would I go anywhere else? There's no shade to nobody else. Don't want anybody else to feel shaded by that. I'm just saying it for me, right? So you can see Carl S. Watkins one LinkedIn. That's my LinkedIn name. I also have two business page on there, Carl Shawn Watkins Consultant. Look that up on LinkedIn and see some of the things and projects and posts I put on there. And also my baby, which I just created maybe in social maybe about a year now, but it's been something that I've been leading with my whole life, vulnerability and leadership. That also has a page for that as well on LinkedIn. So check those out. You can also go to my website, carlshawnwatkins.com. There's a place there to make a clarity session with me. The rest is under construction. I can't wait. I'm excited about the direction that that's going as well. And also, April 4th, I start a new vulnerability transformation program. It's a 4-week intensive that I carry people through these very conversations, and we walk through my 4 steps that I have for all of my programs. And I'm not this extensive. I'm not this extensive minded guru. I have 4 simple steps through all of my coaching programs that bring you to a circle so you can go level by level. Man, I made it easy. I made it easy because it was hard for me.
Yeah.
So I didn't want anyone else to struggle with it. So it's well worth it. I've had a lot
Yeah.
of success with it, and a lot of people have been like, "Wow, I didn't even know this about me," because you didn't
That's
ask you.
yeah.
That's why.
And that's where the process starts, right? You got to
Yes,
ask yourself,
yes,
what are you struggling with right now? Like
that's it.
what's in your way? What are the obstacles? And then go from there. So many great places to find you and connect with you, get to know
Mhm.
more about your work and
Absolutely.
work with you. I will drop all of those links into the chat after this. If you're watching the replay, please just put hashtag replay so that I know when you came in on it on this amazing conversation. Please, if you're not already following Shell Station, do me a favor and hit that bell or hit that follow for me because LinkedIn pages don't have a bell yet. Spoke too soon. I tried to mitigate that earlier last week, and yeah, I went in a little bit of a tizzy. Like, oh my god, business pages don't have the bell. Yes, follow Carl, connect with him, have these amazing conversations. That's how Carl and I started talking.
Yes.
He shared a vulnerable story with me, and that broke down a little bit of a barrier for me to be able to share with him as well.
Yes.
So, conversations for change, we are here for them. Go
Absolutely.
follow Shell Station. Tune in next week for another amazing Operation Separation conversation. And, Carl and I have been talking almost an hour now about making that change, hitting the
Mhm.
reset button and getting to that point of not being able to be sick and tired of being sick and tired anymore. So if you or somebody that you know is struggling or in need of an operation separation, please, by all means, sharing is caring. And this is a
Yes.
very safe space to share these lives with more and more people who need to be supported and feel supported to make the changes that are necessary. And we are here for it. I am Chelle Shapiro, founder of Shell Station. This has been another amazing Operation Separation. Carl Shawn Watkins, such an amazing guest. And if you don't know, he is a lover of the dictionary. And
Yes.
oh, what was the word that we put in parentheses? Carl Collaboration Watkins. He is
That's it.
collaborations
I'm
that
here for it. I'm here for it. The collaborations that move you forward. So that's what it's all about. That's the only way we're going to grow. So I appreciate it, Shell, as always. Love our conversations. And to everyone that tuned in, check this lady out. Yeah, Shell. Go to the Shell Station. And when you think of
yeah.
Shell, Station, think about getting a full up. You know what I mean? Because that's where you're going to get the things that you need. And she's tremendous talent and one that people need to know about. Most
Oh,
definitely.
I appreciate you, Carl, so
Yes.
much. Until next week, everyone, same shell time, same shell station.